Every Wednesday, Megan and I meet our students live so that they can get direct access to us to ask questions about anything property related in our weekly Campfire. Now, today we are going to share with you some of their questions because you may be, having very similar challenges. Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Megan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together, we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Today, we're sharing some of the questions we have in our weekly Campfire. We love this. We love getting together with our students on a Wednesday. We spend, it could be half an hour sometimes an hour. We're giving you a taste of what direct access to us looks like and the ways in which we can really turbocharge your home buying journey.
But before we get into that, we've got a special, not exactly a house, but a special outlook behind you in the video this week.
I am such a proud mum.
We are proud mamas.
We talk about being, in the course, we talk about, we're like your mum and we're old enough to be your mum and we're helping and guiding you, but with the expertise behind us. This is the view from one of our students' properties. They settled on this home yesterday.
Yes.
I'm just so proud of them.
It's
they
gorgeous.
Had some real challenges along the way. But following the process and keeping on track, they actually made it to the summit.
Well, look, they did the work and they also showed up every week at Campfire when they got to the point where they really had some questions that they needed. They used the forum because all of our students have access to us in a forum, so they could post their questions and get expert answers, not what you get on Facebook, right? So they get expert answers from either Megan or myself, right, in the forum. But it got to a point where the search was ramping up and they're starting to get questions and they're like, are they really dumb questions? I don't really know. And I just want to ask and I want to have a conversation. Yeah. And so they started showing up and they showed up every week until they bought their property and we helped them kiss a few frogs. Actually, they were kissing them. We didn't help them kiss the frogs. We helped them recognize the frogs. And then they bought this property, which was it surpassed everything that they looked at. It's such a great surprise.
And those who tune in and join us on this podcast journey, which of course doesn't have all the information that's contained in the course, but you will have heard some of their questions because we have shared some of their questions previously. They were actually the motivation behind the virtual roadshow episode that we did. That was a fun one. And the other one, they looked around the country and still ended up back in a slightly different area than they originally anticipated, but with so much more knowledge.
Absolutely. So they didn't actually end up going too far, which was quite funny. And also we did an episode on couples and getting couples on the same page, and that was inspired by some of their questions as well. So they're almost like our star pupils, but then we've had some other pupils
everybody's
as well.
A star pupil. They're just very interactive and we love it. Now,
extremely.
Every person in their home buying journey is unique. Now, over the last 20 years as a buyer's agent, I've observed that many home buyers share similar challenges and frustrations in spite of these uniqueness. Over the last 20 years as a buyer's agent, I have observed many home buyers share similar challenges and frustrations, despite it being a very unique journey. It's one of the reasons that you and I created the course, to help guide people through those challenges. So whilst we won't be giving you as much detail as our students get, after all, they pay for the privilege of getting direct access to us, we do want to share their questions so that you can understand some of the commonalities, or feel some of the commonalities, and how to, other people are feeling it too.
Yeah, I mean, slightly different tangent here, but, in my 20s, I actually went to therapy for the first time. It's a bit the same. We often say in our business that it's property therapy, so that's why I'm drawing the bow here. I'm saying it's a bit the same. And I remember my therapist, because I used to love the idea of going and basically spending a whole hour just talking about myself and paying for the privilege. And she got me into group therapy. And I remember thinking, I don't want to share the limelight, but I do. I'm a massive advocate for group therapy, and in a professional sense, peer mentoring. It's a similar type of thing.
Absolutely.
And certainly with first home buyers as well, we're effectively sort of like group therapy for first home buyers is our Campfire. But in group therapy, I still remember the first time I realised that somebody else had the same sort of thoughts that I did, because I thought what was going on in my head was supremely unique. And then I went, oh my God. And I guess that's what some humanists refer to as the human condition. It was like, we're all different. You're all individuals and I'm not. And so that's
with some commonalities, with some common challenges. Yeah.
But we do find that with Campfire, and it's great because when somebody asks a question, they might even think it's a dumb question, but it's like someone else will always go, you know what, I thought that too. Oh, thank you. That's been really helpful. And so we want to share it with you today for that reason. So these are sort of some of the questions. Do you want to hit off with the first one, Megan?
Yeah, look, this question from an earlier Campfire, and did we start Campfires with, remember we started the Campfires, Veronica, and it wasn't actually interactive?
Well, it was, but they had to type the questions.
Yeah, they had to type the questions.
And we would talk
so
the
some
answer.
of these are typed, which I'll read. But we recently went through the preliminary application with the mortgage broker. They came back with a number that was way under what we needed to buy in the area that they're interested in. They've done about half the course, so they're well on their way. They think they're getting their team together, which, of course, is step one. Yep. They're saying the main reason is because one of the couple's income fluctuates. She's self-employed, so not consistent like a PAYG employee. So what their question was do we have anything that we could share around this to help them on their journey?
And we did share something. And one thing that we did first was we questioned them a bit about the conversations they've been having with their broker. And what we really uncovered was that the broker they were using really wasn't exploring all the different options and looking at different lenders where their situation was a better match for. And so we actually introduced them to one of the brokers from our preferred panel. And you can access these brokers actually if you like. There's a link in the show notes. And it's on our website, which is homebuyeracademy.com.au/brokers, right? So just if you want to access them. So we actually introduced them to one of the brokers that we have worked with for a long time and we know would actually have a much more strategic approach. Yeah. And amazingly, they were able to access a lot more borrowing. I mean, and also they did have a bit of a job change and all the rest of it. But the fact is that they got guided through all of those decisions. And that was a hell of a lot better outcome for them.
Absolutely. And part of those conversations and the sorts of things that we did share with them was specific questions to ask the brokers. Now, we gave them quite a lot of specific questions that matched their situation, that they could go to the broker and start to almost suggest, well, what about if? Could we? I've heard about. What do you think? These specific questions that we gave them in Campfire actually helped them to have a much deeper and better conversation with the brokers who we knew were able to help them in a way that perhaps they hadn't been helped by a previous broker. So Veronica, I felt really good when they came back the next week and they talked to us about using these specific questions that we'd given them in Campfire and how productive the conversation was and how much they were kind of given, some things they were given by the broker as a result of those conversations, that they then had a real plan to move forward to get better from a financial fitness point of view. And they knew what they needed to do to be more attractive to the banks. We we're not suggesting by any stretch of imagination you lie or mislead. No, what you can do is get financially fit. And that conversation they had with the broker allowed them to do that, to get themselves in a much better position. They had the ability to pay the mortgage plus some interest rate rises, but what they needed was to be able to show the bank that they were a good risk for the bank to lend the money to.
Yeah. And that is all about having a good relationship with the right broker, isn't it? I mean, otherwise you're just taking the answers
Asking the right
and
questions.
they're going, I can't, I'm not able to buy, I can't buy yet. And it's like, actually they could, so that was amazing. Here's another one, which is, it's almost like it's almost a half a question, right? I've done the whole course and feel like I have all the knowledge, which is fantastic, right? But now just feeling a bit stuck based on the current climate. And that is not many desired listings in the area I'm looking in, which is honestly common. That is a given. Expect
at the
that.
moment.
And just feeling all the fear, interest rate rises and changing in borrowing capacity. Now, obviously, it seems to be that the rises have slowed down or stopped at the moment, but we never know what's ahead of us. But it is shaky territory when you're looking at taking on borrowing and it's a climate of increasing interest rates. So
what of uncertainty there, that fear and uncertainty, isn't there?
Yeah. So sitting in a weird place where I feel ready but not ready. But also not sure that what will ever make me feel totally ready. I think it's just partly waiting for the right, perfectly imperfect property, but also biting the bullet and doing it despite the fear, right? And this person said, mostly here today, just to connect is so helpful for me to not feel alone in this whole thing. And that's exactly the point of Campfire.
Yeah.
But talking about the fear, and so being ready but not ready. And we do hear this quite a lot from first home buyers. And that is because you're about to take the plunge and you're thinking, is it a good thing? Am I buying a good property?
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't
Is
even
it the right
agonise.
time?
Yeah. Will the market fall? Am I an idiot for buying now because I should be waiting for prices to fall? Because there's a lot of that sort of talk going on.
Yeah.
Our advice is always to focus on what is within your control. And that is your search for the right property for you. And so having done the whole course and having all the knowledge and actually knowing the order to do it in, it's like focus on doing the steps in the right order, focus on working through the process, finding that right property. Now, this person has bought because they did this. It's like rather than get distracted and I guess taken away from their path by all the noise, It's like, let's focus on what is in your control, and what is in your control is looking for the right property in the right area within your budget.
Yeah. And it's that age-old piece of advice that still rings true, and that is the best time to buy is when you're financially ready and able. The fear
And
that sits
when you
around
find
it.
the right property.
And
Those two things.
Yes, but you've got to get that bit right. We'll teach you that bit.
Yeah.
But I think, what was really interesting about this question and how we interacted with the student in this particular situation was a lot of what we talked about was mindset, because they were financially ready. They knew that they could financially afford the property. They had their steps in the right order, as you said, but it was a mindset that they needed to overcome. And what's really interesting is last week, for those of you who tuned in last week, when we talked to Damien and Aaron, they do a lot around mindset, particularly from the money side of things. It was a really, really, you and I really enjoyed that discussion with them because there was a lot that came out that isn't about property, but it's property related. But having that mindset to overcome the fears that you might have around what might happen in the future and what you can do to kind of what do they say? Forewarned is forearmed, is to know what it might be and then to have the strategies in place to say, okay, well, if this happens, interest rate rise, what can I do to have some comfort around that happening? Then the worst thing that can happen is it happens and you've got the strategies in place. You know what you're going to do when the worst thing happens and you're ready and you're in control. So that was a really interesting mindset discussion.
Yeah. And we do talk a lot about mindset in Campfire. I mean, it really is about, and we're not rah-rah. I think if you listen to this enough, you'll know that we are not rah-rah. It's not all property is good. You just got to get on the ladder. We do not
Definitely
talk that
not.
way. Absolutely do not. We're here to protect you so that the steps that you take are actually well advised and within guardrail, right? But interestingly enough, one of the other comments in that particular campfire was from someone else who said that totally feel the stress of interest rate rises, even the lower amount that we can borrow now. So bearing in mind that every time interest rates go up, your borrowing capacity goes down. Even the lower amount we can borrow now would have been more than enough just a few years ago. It's nuts and frustrating. And this is the problem with waiting for prices to fall.
Yeah.
And this is why we say focus on what you can do in the circumstances now. Focus on what is possible, what you have control over, because we don't have control over the market. We don't have control over whether interest rates go up or down, but we can put safeguards in place, and we can put buffers in place. We can do lots of mitigating things. Once again, it's step by step in the right order with the right guardrails. Next question.
Absolutely. So we had another question in Campfire, which was we really want to use a buyer's agent, but it's so expensive. Yes, it is a lot of on-the-ground work that's put in there. It just feels that it's a misuse of perfectly good deposit money. Totally understand that as well. And we are buyer's agents, right? So we're not saying don't use buyer's agents. Remember that. As first-time buyers, do you think it's worth using an agent, or are they really for people who have like an established property or equity that they can draw on?
Well, the answer is yes and no. So the answer is if you can afford a buyer's agent, and we always say you need an experienced buyer's agent. You really need to have somebody who, if they don't have 10 years experience, they work with someone who does, who understands market cycles, entire market cycles, up and down, and numerous cycles as well. So they really get that longevity piece. That's the first thing, that experience. Second thing, they have to have local experience and local expertise. Right? Because the problem is that a lot of buyer's agents spread themselves very thin, and they really, jack of all trades, master of none. They really don't have a depth of experience. And thirdly, they have to have really good ethics and a rigorous due diligence process, because if they don't, if you do our course, which is a fraction of the price of using a buyer's agent, you will actually learn to do what some of these new buyer's agents out there don't know how to do.
Don't know what to do.
So
particularly the due diligence.
Oh my God, the due diligence. Because I know it's shocking, but you get your buyer's agent license and there's nothing in there about due diligence.
There's nothing about the process.
I mean nothing. And nothing about the buying process. It doesn't teach that.
There is a bit about pricing a property.
Yep, there is that.
I think from memory that might be the limitation of the due diligence pass or the valuation pass.
That's all there is in there. And I have gone through the course curriculum of the Cert 4. So therefore, you will actually get more exposure by doing this course. Yeah. And in fact, some of our students have done this course and then did still engage a buyer's agent, but they were able to then work out whether the buyer's agent knew more than they did.
Yep. They were time poor and they really needed someone to help them, but they also wanted that extra level of risk management, that extra level of protection, and also the access to some of the properties. I mean, the thing about a buyer's agent is not just if they're an experienced person, they can guide you through the process and they know things that, they might have come across once in 20 years. But when it comes up again, we had an example in the office. We've only ever had a caveat lodged on a property once in 19 years. In 19 years, we'd only ever had a caveat lodged on a property that we were purchasing once, right at the last hour. So the caveat was lodged, can't settle the property. A whole process has to be undertaken. We had that again the other day. So I could draw on my knowledge from the previous time where I learned what the process was by asking a lot of questions of the lawyers involved. This time I could go, right, what we need to do is we need to talk to this person, this person, this person. I could draw the experts in because I'd had that something like 12 years ago, I think that last one was. So that depth of experience that a buyer's agent can bring of those unusual situations can be really, really valuable.
And so the other thing too, where if you're buying, it doesn't matter whether you're a first home buyer, a 10th home buyer, or investor, or whatever, but if you're buying in an area that you are not residing in, it is very difficult to buy from a distance. And so we would always recommend that you find a buyer's agent who has back to that local expertise and deep experience and a good due diligence process. They're those three things. And if you can't, then you got to do the work and do it yourself. And the job of buying a property, the responsibility lies on the individual making the decision. And we can't stress that enough, that there's a term called caveat emptor in every single state and territory in this country.
Yeah.
It's worse in some cases and slightly less worse in others. And when I say worse, I mean that caveat emptor means buyer beware. That means the responsibility lies 100% on you, the buyer, to make sure that you've done all your fact checks, due diligence, and all the rest of it. And if you don't know what you don't know, just think about how much money you're spending and you're signing up to a 30-year mortgage, right?
Yes.
You want to know what you don't know. And so you either, and we, as I said, we encourage you to do the course if you're not going to use a buyer's agent. And if you are going to use a buyer's agent, there's still value in doing the course.
Yeah, it's that understanding yourself of what the process is, rather than going through the process with someone guiding you, but getting to a point and going, oh, I haven't done that yet. Or, oh, I hadn't actually engaged a solicitor yet. Oh, it arms you with I know what's coming up, rather than oh gosh, something's happened and I need to deal with it now.
Yeah, everything's in chaos. It's horrible.
Yes, it is hard buying a property, but there is a process.
Now, the next question was around, one of our students who decided the focus is in buying an investment property due to school catchments. And what that means is that this was a young family. They had 3 kids, I think, who were already in school. I think 2 of them were already in school and the other one was about to go to school. And so they wanted to make sure that the kids were all in the same school. So they had to stay living in a certain area to ensure that the youngest one could still go to the same school as the oldest ones. I think that's the way it worked. So the question was, what do you think I should focus on short term, say for
next Wednesday, to come back to you?
Literally,
with...
You're
looking at it going, what?
As I read this, this is the sort of question we get. Yeah, this is the sort of question we get. What do you think I should focus on short term, say for next Wednesday? Come back to you with X, Y, Z to kick me back into Home Buyer Academy gear. So that's basically into home buying gear, because they'd sort of got a bit off track because they're thinking we can't afford to buy a home where we want to live. And so therefore I need to look at investments. And so asking the question, should I complete modules 1 to 3 again, or jump into the where to buy workshop for investors, or find 3 areas? Like, what should I do? Where should I start? And what do we say to him?
Look, it was a really interesting conversation, this one, because they'd done the course with a home buyer, we're going to live in it mindset. Yeah. And one of the great things about this course is it really does challenge you to talk to your partner about what's important. And part of the course is the 3 Ps, the where to buy tutorial, which is position, property, and price. Now, I'm not going to go into it, but essentially it forces you to have conversations about where your compromises are. And it is a process to go through. So these guys worked out that they actually couldn't afford what they wanted within their price range in the area they had to be in. So the one thing they couldn't compromise on for their home to live in was the area. That then made them switch. So they've gone through, they've talked to their support crew, they've talked about, okay, we're going to tilt now. Instead of the home that we're going to live in, we're going to buy an investment property. So the question here is, we thought we were ready to move forward with this, but we now know we can't do what we were going to do. We're going to now re-engage in the process as investors, with an investor mindset. Now, this process does work for investors as well. So it's not just first home buyers that benefit from the course. So the question here was really interesting, because it was like, well, how do we do this again without just doing the whole course? And the conversations that we had was around, going back to their support crew and refocusing those or changing the focus of those conversations, so that right from the very beginning, with their support crew, they're going back into the process with the right information that they needed, because it is slightly different, particularly when you talk to a mortgage broker about your borrowing capacity as an owner-occupier versus an investor. It is very different. So the step 1 was to go back to the support crew, have a look again at what their options were in that space and what they needed to do, and then to start that process of working out the areas. So the where to buy workshop for investors, great place to start for these people.
Yeah. And so back to the first bit, which is step 1, the support crew, then what they wouldn't need to check when you're looking for owner-occupier property is you don't need to go to an accountant to get some advice on cash flow and tax.
Yep.
Whereas when you're buying an investment property, there's some extra areas that you do need to get an understanding on. So cash flow works that, when you're buying an investment property, you get income but you also got some outgoings as well. But you also get some tax breaks you wouldn't get as an owner-occupier. So really to get good guidance around what does that actually mean in net, every month, how much money have we got to allocate to this?
And these were questions that in Campfire, Veronica, and we go, as we say, in much more depth in Campfire than we do in the podcast here. But the kinds of questions that we were able to give them along the lines of what you're talking about, but much more in-depth questions
of course,
to go back to their support crew.
And to talk to their accountant to make sure that before they go down this path, they're actually got a different set of information in their head so they're clear on going down the right path from the very beginning with all the right tools in their backpack, if you like. And so that's great. I mean, because, from our point of view, when is anyone ever going to ask that question and going to get that information? And most people's heads are spinning with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so you can come, when your head's spinning, you come along Campfire, download, and we're like, right, let's get you focused on what's the next thing you've got to do that's going to actually propel you along the path where you want to go.
Yeah, yeah. And it is different mindset as well. Yeah.
Totally.
So next question was, who would you reach out to for a cash flow analysis? So budget analysis sort of stuff to see if an investment property is in fact a good strategy for cash flow.
And that's where we come back to that, recommending back to step one, which was, get your support crew. And in this particular case, you need an accountant in your support crew.
It's also gathering the information. So one, having the right questions. So we gave them a lot of questions to ask in this situation. But the other thing is having a bit of an idea of what that might look like. So for example, and again, won't give a huge amount of detail here, but one of the questions when you're doing a cash flow analysis, you need to have an idea of what the purchase price might be, but you also have to have a bit of an idea of what the rent might be on that property to make the assumptions, to do a cash flow analysis.
The repayments.
You have to have a bit of an idea of what property management might cost, So there's some things that you need to gather to go back to those experts in your team to give them the information to make to give them the assumptions to do the cash flow analysis on.
And so that's something we talked about.
Help
what
them
those figures
that.
are.
Yep.
Now, here's another question. I'm pretty much priced out of the area where I really want to buy. There are some apartment blocks, but they all have commercial underneath. And given there are very few apartment blocks in the area, though, would that be considered B grade? Great question.
Such a good question. There was a lot that we talked about here, Veronica, in terms of just having a thing like this doesn't necessarily say it's A or B grade. There's so many other aspects that need to go into it. So the sorts of things that we sent this person back to have a look at was, one, there were very few apartment complexes, but what else is happening? What is the zoning of things around? There's certain areas in Brisbane that were rezoned a number of years ago that used to only have a few complexes in them. They were rezoned as transit-oriented developments, was what they were called at the time, and they were focused around train stations. So the idea being that the developers were attracted to the rezoning of these areas to build bigger complexes so that people could access public transport much more quickly. Now, as a strategy, pretty good one from a transport point of view, but it does have an effect on the value of that property in the long term if there's a lot more of a similar type thing. And we saw that in an area north of Brisbane where that transit-oriented development was done, and values have really only just recovered to what people were paying for the properties about 8 years ago, because there was such a big influx. So that would be, a one thing to look at. Now, some of those have commercial areas underneath. That in and of itself didn't make it B grade. It was some of these other things that contributed to the bigger picture.
But the commercial development underneath, in quite a lot of council areas, that they've made that a prerequisite of a development. So that's part of their development control plans. And so the developers have to build this commercial space. And you know what? I've gone through many, many areas where it's like they're white elephants. Like half of them are empty, or they've got really shitty tenants in them, or they're grubby.
The commercial part of it, Veronica.
Yeah. And so when you look around, you just think, look around and think, okay, is it full of cafes, and maybe there's a yoga studio, or maybe there's, some really groovy sort of bit of fun, and it brings people to the area, and it's amenities that are really
like that community
enticing.
kind of feel to it.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
If you've got all that happening, then yeah.
But it may not be a B grade.
If you got the white elephant going on. So there's tumbleweeds, going down the street and they've all got 4 lease signs on them. Then you think, I don't know. That's just the council insisted on this development and really there's no demand for it. And so therefore it's a bit of a vacuum. It's a bit of a cultural vacuum. And that's a negative, as far as I'm concerned with any building. Could be a great building, could be full of great apartments. But if it feels like it's a ghost town, then, So there's clues just out and about. And so we talked through a lot of that with this particular Campfire member.
In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out your first home buyer guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.